On July 16, 1980, Jeremy Stoner was born in California. He had 3 siblings. Justin was the younger brother, and Jason and Joshua were the older brothers. Their home was in Vallejo, California, a charming and picturesque community in its own right. Jeremy was a contented and lively youngster. He was devoted to both his friends and family. Attending school and picking up new skills was something he cherished. He also enjoyed watching cartoons, playing with his toys, and riding his bike. He had a huge heart and a bright smile. It was February 21, 1987, a Saturday morning. 6-year-old Jeremy and his 2 older brothers, aged 11 and 9 years, were playing outside close to their home. A relative was keeping an eye on Jeremy and his brothers while their parents were at work. Their relative had to abruptly depart to take her ailing daughter to the hospital. The boys were instructed to wait for their parents to return at home. Rather, they made their way to a neighbor's residence. While they were there, a neighbor scolded Jeremy for spilling ketchup, and they left right after. At 5 p.m., the boy's mother came home to find the house unoccupied, leading her to believe that the boys were playing at the neighbor's, as they frequently did. However, when the 2 older boys returned 2 hours later without Jeremy, the family initiated a search. They contacted the police since Jeremy was nowhere to be found. It didn't take long for Vallejo police to conclude that Jeremy had been abducted. He was last seen, according to reports, at a Dairy Queen on Springs Road, which is roughly 5 minutes' walk from the family's house. Around 7:30 that evening, a worker there reported to the investigators that he had seen Jeremy with an adult guy. 4 days later, on February 25, 1987, Jeremy's body was discovered on Sherman Island in Sacramento County. 4 people heading along Sherman Island Road in the Delta became bogged in the mud. In search of something to put between the tires, the driver got out. Rather, what she found was a small boy's body. He'd been beaten, stabbed, and choked. They contacted the authorities and informed them of their discovery. After gathering all the evidence they could and storing it for later use, investigators quickly made their way to the crime scene. In Vallejo, word of Jeremy's passing traveled fast. The people were horrified by what had happened to him and were devastated. They wanted to do everything in their power to help his family since they felt bad for them. They hugged them and handed them flowers and cards. When Jeremy vanished, they looked for him. For him, they held a candlelight vigil. They offered prayers for him and his family as well. Terry Curtola was Vallejo's mayor at the time. He claimed that for 4 days, the residents of Vallejo joined the Stoner family. He restated that they had looked, prayed, and wept for him. It wasn't long until a suspect walked right inside the Vallejo Police Department. Sean Quincy Melton, an unemployed security guard, informed authorities he could have information regarding the case approximately a week after Jeremy's death. Melton acknowledged that he tried to dazzle police with his rudimentary research. To use his own words, he aspired to be a big shot. However, Melton's gradual change from a swaggering detective to a confused crime suspect was captured on camera throughout his interrogation. He had a terrible past and a disturbing mentality, as indicated by his authorship of The Wolf's Den, a book about child exploitation. Despite his insistence that it's a work of fiction, others questioned whether it was completely unrelated to his personal experiences. Sean Melton willingly went to the police station to give details about the case. He mentioned that he had heard tales and seen certain things that could help identify the offender. The police, however, suspected that he was involved in the crime. There was good cause for them to be skeptical about Sean Melton. Prior to his appointment, Sean Melton's psychologist reported to the police that he had admitted to having unsettling ideas about young boys. The doctor voiced worries that Sean Melton might be dangerous and might be connected to the case of Jeremy Stoner. Sean Melton was the target of a lengthy 30-hour interview by the police, during which they tested him with a polygraph and asked a lot of questions. They also drew a sketch of him and contrasted it with the kidnapper's description provided by a witness. Their aim was to gather intelligence and possibly determine his connection to the case. Sean Melton adamantly maintained his innocence, stating that he was unaware of the situation and denied any role in the crime. The polygraph test was successfully completed by him, and the sketch of him did not match the witness's account. He insisted that his only goal was to help the police crack the case. Still, the police continued to pursue Sean Melton and proposed a fresh theory. They claim Sean Melton had numerous personality disorders and speculate that the crime may have been committed by one of his alter egos, John Wolfe. They asserted that Sean Melton did not recall committing these acts. In retaliation, the police detained Sean Melton and accused him of killing Jeremy in kidnapping. However, there was insufficient evidence to convict them. There were 2 trials, but the jury were unable to come to a unanimous decision in both cases. The judge was forced to dismiss the case as a result. Sean Melton died in 2000, but he never acknowledged having anything to do with the terrible end of Jeremy Stoner. Because there had been no development and no new leads or evidence, the Jeremy Stoner case was labeled a cold case and went unresolved for several years. However, there was a noteworthy advancement in Jeremy Stoner's situation in 2023. Thanks to cutting-edge technology, the authorities were able to obtain a fresh lead through DNA testing. Jeremy's remains samples were compared to those in a criminal database by the police via DNA testing. This development promised to throw fresh light on the enduring enigma surrounding Jeremy's terrible end. When the police discovered a match, they eventually located the offender. The name of the perpetrator is Fred Marion Kane III. Kane, 69, was taken into custody from his Central Point, Oregon, residence. District Attorney Krishna Abram expressed gratitude for having cold case investigators who are so committed to solving these horrifying murders, regardless of the passage of time. According to 1984 media accounts, Kane, who was 30 at the time, was allegedly accused of attacking a 17-year-old in San Bernardino County. On suspicion of attacking the teenager at knife point, Kane and his roommate were taken into custody. Kane was charged with forceful assault and weapon usage, with enhancements for 4 previous jail terms, but a jury ruled him not guilty later that year. Because the investigation is still underway, the District Attorney's Office for Solano County has stated that it will not be providing any more information. But Martinez police have probably noticed Kane's arrest. From the start, Jeremy's case and Eric Coy's were frequently brought up in the same sentence. Just 1 month before to Jeremy's disappearance, on January 19, 1987, 9-year-old Eric rode his bike from his Martinez home to a relative's house. Eric rode the trip frequently and knew it well. He left his house at about 11 in the morning, knowing that once he got to his relative's house, a few blocks away, he would call, just like he always did. After he failed to return home, a search was conducted. His remains were discovered not far from Martinez Junior High School. After receiving about a dozen stab wounds, he passed away from his wounds. Eric's case hasn't been resolved as of yet. We are asking anyone with information on this case to contact the Cold Case Unit of the District Attorney at 777-848-477. On September 28, 2023, Kane appeared in Solano County Court for the first time. When Kane was taken into the courtroom, Jeremy Stoner's family was present. "I'm not sure whether this is a relief," said Jeremy's mother, Karen Tabler. "Definitely not feeling well. It was difficult," she said, "to be in the same room as Kane." Solano County Chief Deputy District Attorney Paul Sequeira stated, "I have been around a long time, but I don't think you'll ever get closure. Although I have never witnessed actual closure for a family, I believe that knowing that someone would be held accountable would be somewhat consoling." Dennis Lee First, 64, was discovered dead in his Cedar Rapids, Iowa, condominium on May 11, 2007. He'd been beaten and stabbed to death. Dennis, according to Tammy Mimes, assistant manager of the Hawthorne Hills apartments where he resides, had prostate cancer, lived off of Social Security, and didn't have many visitors. Tammy claimed to have informed Robert Gross, a maintenance employee at the apartments, after receiving a call from a friend asking her to see how Dennis was doing. Robert repeatedly knocked on Dennis's door. When he got no response, he went inside the residence. There he discovered Dennis laying face up on the bed with his feet on the ground. When Robert saw there was a lot of blood, he dialed 911. The State Crime Lab of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation and Ankeny received evidence gathered at the site for analysis. According to Christine Burmeister, Dennis's first wife, he had a difficult life. It's unbelievable that someone would stab him. He could hardly get around. Dennis and Christine were parents to 2 kids. Their daughter Laura was born in 1965 and their son Brad in 1963. The pair resided in Olin, Jones County in the 1970s, where Dennis was employed as a purchasing agent with Monticello Steel Company. Since the divorce in 1981, he had made Cedar Rapids his home. Dennis had been detained in 1990 on suspicion of driving while intoxicated and stealing from nearby establishments. In addition, he was charged with making threats against a guy whose room he had rented. Dennis's life didn't get any better after his kid died in an automobile accident in 1993. Dennis gradually lost contact with his daughter, his former spouse, and other family members, but he had started phoning them again a few years before he passed away. In late May 2007, Cedar Rapids police served 5 search warrants in the case, searching not only Dennis's but also Curtis Paget's flat. Investigators collected his fingerprints and a cheek swab sample of DNA. From his apartment, they also grabbed a pair of his boots. The last person to have seen 15-year-old Erin Pospisil, who vanished from Cedar Rapids on June 3, 2001, is Paget. Erin's older brother's Buddy Paget reported to the police that in 2001, he and Erin were leaving the Pospisil family home at the same time, and he offered to drive Erin to her friend Brett's house. When they got to Brett's house, Paget said there was nobody at the door. Erin was walking back to his truck when a black Chevrolet Cavalier with tinted rear windows pulled up to the curb. He claimed that Erin approached the car and struck up a brief discussion with a person. Then, before boarding the Cavalier's rear seat, he said to him, "These guys will give me a ride." Erin hasn't been seen since she left her house with Paget, and police were unable to locate any more witnesses to support Paget's account of seeing a black Cavalier in the neighborhood. Ultimately, 42-year-old Curtis Randall Paget was detained and accused of killing Dennis First on March 1, 2023. According to Lynn County Attorney Nick Maybank, the Cedar Rapids Police Department's dedication to its community and victims is demonstrated by this particular case. This instance demonstrates the department's tenacity in pursuing justice for victims and survivors, even in situations when the public may not be aware of them. Following several months of follow-up and a recent final consultation, Maybanks concluded that Paget was responsible for Dennis's death after the department's cold case team approached them to evaluate the matter. The specific reason Paget was arrested was not disclosed by the police, nor was it indicated if more DNA testing was the cause. Nevertheless, a partial blood boot print that matched boots found at Paget's house was later revealed during the press conference. Additionally, a blood-stained oven mitt was discovered. The interior of the oven mitt has DNA from both Dennis and Paget. Additionally, Paget's fingerprint was discovered in a drawer of Dennis's flat and on a knife sharpener. Erin was cited in the spring of 2002, but there have been no more developments in her case. In Cedar Rapids, Erin was seen in a convenience store. She was in the back seat of a car with license plates from Illinois. The automobile was not found, despite the fact that Cedar Rapids police received this report. It has never been possible for them to confirm the sighting. The individual who saw Erin is still certain that it was her because he knew her well. Erin is characterized as a female Caucasian with eyes and hair that are both dark brown. Erin had red highlights in her hair and a little scar above her eye when she vanished. Use this number to contact the Cedar Rapids Police Department if you have any information regarding her or the case. The skeleton remains of a young woman known only as the Granby Girl, who was shot in the head and whose remains were found on a logging road in Granby, Massachusetts, approximately 15 miles north of Springfield, were found for over 45 years. The nameless woman was referred to as Granby Girl for years. In the end, authorities relied on cutting-edge DNA research to help them unravel the mystery. Patricia Ann Tucker, who was 28 years old at the time of her murder and had a 5-year-old kid, was identified as the murder victim on January 31 by authorities. For decades after her death, her loved ones were unaware of it, and her killer is still at large. The police had a person of interest, but he is no longer alive. It was her late spouse. At a press conference on Monday, March 6, the district attorney's office in Massachusetts declared that Tucker had been identified by detectives as the murder victim, who was popularly referred to as the Granby Girl because of the neighborhood in which she was discovered. In November 1978, the body of the 28-year-old was discovered in Granby, a tiny hamlet close to Holyoke. Ancestry.com's DNA data proved important in establishing a breakthrough that allowed law authorities to establish contact with Tucker's surviving family. Stephen Gagney, first assistant district attorney for Northwestern, provided an explanation at a press conference. Tucker was shot in the temple and hauled by the neck by someone, according to police records that the local news source masslive.com published. On November 15, 1978, loggers discovered her lifeless body buried beneath leaves and a stump. Later, she was interred in an unmarked grave, where she stayed until amateur detectives became interested in her case. Tucker's 50-year-old son, Matthew Dale, informed masslive.com that he never knew why his mother vanished and that he grew up in North Carolina. He told the outlet that he had given his DNA to a database in case they ever found her, because he had assumed she was dead since he was in his 30s. About 2 years ago, his suspicion that his mother had passed away began to come true. The DNA profile of the Granby Girl was obtained by local police with the assistance of a forensic laboratory. This allowed them to identify a woman in Maryland who was probably connected to the Granby Girl. The woman who directed them to her son, Matthew Dale, was questioned by police. Investigators are unsure of Tucker's killer. Gerald Coleman was her spouse. They were wed in 1977 in Middletown, Connecticut, and at the time of her death, they were residing in East Hampton, Connecticut. According to officials, Coleman never reported his wife missing. Those looking into Tucker's death are quite interested in him. While not going so far as to label him a murder suspect, authorities did mention that he passed away in a Massachusetts state prison in 1996. Dale reported to the police that Coleman dropped him off in Chicopee with a woman named Laura Holmes around the time his mother vanished. When Tucker and Coleman failed to respond for a few days, Holmes alerted the police, leading to Dale's eventual reunion with his biological father. Dale never saw Coleman or his mother again, according to Gagney. Investigators discovered that Coleman had been arrested for attempted kidnapping, violent assault, and carrying a handgun in Connecticut in 1968. He was found guilty in 1995 of rape, indecent assault and battery, and assault with a deadly weapon in the Hampton County Superior Court. 1996 saw his death in a state penitentiary. Gerald Coleman, despite his passing, is undoubtedly someone who is very interested in Patricia's absence and demise. The murder investigation is still ongoing, according to Gagny, who also stated that authorities are trying to get in touch with anybody who knew Tucker at any point in her life, but particularly when she was married to Coleman. Call the Granby Police Department at 413-467-9222. Send an email to Detective James White at jwhite@jagbpd, or send a message via the department's website if you have any information. The murder of 20-year-old Sunny Orange student Megan McDonald took place 20 years ago. McDonald was 20 years old when she quit her employment at the American Cafe restaurant in the Galleria Mall in the town of Wallkill. She had graduated from Burt Catholic High School in 2000. She was seen twice outside of parties in her old town of Wallkill area of Greenway Terrace on March 13, 2003, while out with friends in Middletown. The latest sighting occurred at around midnight. Then she was gone. On March 15, 2003, her battered body was discovered in a field off of Bowser Road. In the Middletown Cemetery of St. Joseph's Church, her heart-shaped headstone bears the official date of her death. On March 17, her Mercury Sable was discovered at the Kensington Manor apartment building. In the 2 decades since her death, police have followed up on over 800 leads and conducted dozens of interviews. The work they produced in the Troop F barracks in Middletown filled entire file cabinet drawers. In 2022, Dateline's Cold Case Spotlight series highlighted Megan's story, interacting with detectives from the New York State Police who had lately started to re-examine the case, as well as Megan's family. Lieutenant Brad Natalizio, a detective at the time, was one of the investigators Dateline interviewed. In honor of the 20th anniversary, he gave an update and spurred media attention. As a result of the public attention, authorities have gotten a ton more leads. An original witness provided a fresh detail in a follow-up interview. Dateline was informed by New York State Police Detective Brad Natalizio about a loudspeaker-equipped car that was spotted behind McDonald's vehicle. The Dateline report states that the witness only saw it because the volume was so high. The vehicle appeared to be a Honda Civic hatchback and was probably dark in color. Her father worked as a homicide detective for the New York Police Department for 20 years until passing away in 2002 from a heart attack. Karen, the sister of McDonald, told Dateline. She told the television that she was convinced that the detectives working on her sister's case would not give up until it was solved because she had seen him work over the years. He was 47 years old. McDonald arrived to a Wallkill residence at around 7 p.m. that evening for a birthday celebration, but the complaint stated that she chose not to enter because she was in the company of a man named Edward Holly, who owed her money, and she had attempted to end their relationship a few days prior to her death. After traveling for about 30 minutes, McDonald reached a Middletown residence and called several people in an attempt to locate marijuana, including a friend who was present at the party where Holly was. McDonald left the party at midnight, announcing that she had to go straight home because she had work the next day. McDonald informed everyone she was going to go smoke when she returned to the Wallkill birthday celebration at around 12:15 a.m., and 2 minutes later, she drove away, according to the lawsuit. When McDonald got to suspect number 2's house at 12:25 a.m., he got in her car and informed McDonald that he didn't have any marijuana for her. In a 2010 interview with suspect number 2, McDonald then told him she was going to go get some marijuana from Holly. Holly was McDonald's primary marijuana supply. The lawsuit states that at around 12:30 a.m., a witness observed a dark Honda Civic hatchback following McDonald's automobile through Wallkill. When McDonald's automobile was discovered 500 feet from Holly's house, a few days later, authorities discovered the 20-year-old had died in the driver's seat. Holly later admitted to the police that he knew McDonald was either present the night she was slain or outside the home party. Holly admitted to authorities in one questioning that he returned home that evening in his purple Honda Civic hatchback. Holly gave a lot of conflicting accounts and justifications. Authorities claimed Holly repeatedly informed them he last saw McDonald a few days before she was slain during an incident. But each time he gave an interview, the police claimed his explanation for the altercation had changed. This is included in the criminal complaint. The allegations stated that in 2021, an analysis revealed Holly's and McDonald's DNA on McDonald's phone, which was left in her car. According to the charges, authorities suspect that on the night of the murder, Holly looked through McDonald's phone and discovered that she had recently called an ex, which infuriated Holly. The accusation stated that an examination conducted in January 2023 showed that on the night the 20-year-old was slain, McDonald, Holly, and the suspect too had their cell phones together at strategic locations. The lawsuit stated that McDonald's body was discovered in an area that was familiar to suspect too. According to the complaint, Holly was in McDonald's automobile in March 2023, based on DNA evidence. On April 20, 2023, the New York State Police detained Edward Holly, age 42, of Wauwanda, New York, on suspicion of second-degree murder in relation to Megan McDonald's March 2003 death. According to the press announcement, McDonald was found dead on March 15, 2003, from blunt force trauma in the village of Wallkill, Orange County. Karen Whalen praised the cops for their unwavering perseverance. For them, the question was never if this day would arrive, but rather when. Whalen, whose father Dennis was a retired NYPD officer, James Whalen, stated, "We have always stood with the police, and we will always stand with them." Karen's husband said, "Today the police gave us an answer that we had been searching for over 20 years. There is now a name and a face attached to the monster that ended Megan's life so viciously and mindlessly. To our family, the person who was detained today will always be viewed as a coward." On October 6, 1982, at 4:30 a.m., a hiker in Santa Cruz County discovered the remains of a male human near Natural Bridges State Park. Investigators came to the conclusion that someone had killed the unidentified individual. The case remained unsolved for 41 years until Othram Labs entered into a significant collaboration with a developing forensic-grade genome sequencing company. Othram is the first private laboratory in North America designed specifically to provide human identification from forensic and crime scene data. They successfully handle cases similar to this one across the country. Othram received DNA extract from the victim's bones that had been delivered by the California Department of Justice. Othram evaluated the amount of DNA that is actually there by performing what is known as a suitability analysis on it. Othram Labs can examine hundreds of thousands of DNA markers, which facilitates the process of tracing more distant ancestors and retracing one's lineage back to the immediate family. In this instance, the victim's family was identified through genealogy. The FBI then became involved, and after they had a suspicion as to who it may be, they were able to validate that identification through some fingerprinting. After making that crucial connection, law enforcement was able to identify the body that had been known to detectives for so long as John Doe. In October 2023, the public was notified that the individual whose remains were found was 28-year-old Rodney Allen Rumsey. Born on May 25, 1954, Rodney was a resident of Sacramento, California. This started out as an unidentified human remains case, and now they have an entirely new case that they are investigating, stated Michael Vaughan, Othram Labs Director of Account Management. "It feels great. The community and detectives are affected, and decades of family members are affected. We celebrate it and move on to the next one. On Rodney's left forearm, there was a tattoo of a skull and a crimson rose with 3 leaves. Black braids, 3 red-tipped feathers protruding from the head, and scarlet around the eye sockets were all features of the skull. Investigators still have a lot of work ahead of them, but they will make every effort to get in touch with Rumsey's family. According to Santa Cruz Police Department spokeswoman, Lieutenant Karina Sekener, call the Santa Cruz Police Department's investigation unit at 831-425,820 or the department tip line at 831-425,995 if you have any information about this case.